Welcome to the Weekly Game Drive, Episode 6. Today we have Sky with us, our new host, replacing Sky, our old host, and I am Basil, our old host, replacing Basil, our new host.
Wait, what?
And today we have...
Wait, what?
Welcome, Sky.
I'm really confused. Wait, I'm replacing myself?
Listen, Sky, you can't question the way my head works. It just because it doesn't. But let's get into the news. Today we have quite a few topics to go over, including some game reveals, some teases, a couple of events, and just general news in a newsish fashion. Starting, this announcement doesn't get me that excited, but I feel like it's worth mentioning because it's a big game and people are always excited about the new Smash Fighters. So they recently revealed what's her name?
It's
Ramen?
No, it's
No,
Min Min. Wow.
Min Min
Just because she's
from
ramen themed,
ARMS.
her name is Ramen Basil?
Yes, and
Jeez.
she's a DLC Fighter 6 for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Uh, cool fact, I guess, she's the first female DLC fighter, or exclusively female DLC fighter, because they had one who had like a female version and a male version.
Yeah.
One of those Fire Emblems characters, I think.
Yeah.
Oh.
Violet had both, yeah. So.
But to me, the more interesting thing that came out of this was they revealed Vault Boy from Fallout, as a skin for the Shooty Me character,
Yeah.
which is kind of cool. Like it's a Fallout presence in Smash.
I mean, that's oh jeez, that's Nintendo for you. They've been really dipping their toes and like getting these interesting crossover like costumes as of late that like I'm not expecting. Because remember, we also had I was surprised when Cuphead got one. I was surprised when Sans Undertale got one. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool that Vault Boy got some representation, and it was a pretty cool way that they did it in the actual direct thingy that they do. It was pretty exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
I can talk a little bit about Min Min, just a tiny bit. So as someone who didn't play a ton of ARMS, but I've seen a lot of people like talk about ARMS because it was it attempted to be a thing that was bigger than it ended up being. They wanted it to actually kind of have a bit of a competitive presence. Also, I have some knowledge of fighting games, so this kind of helps. But it didn't end up getting a huge scene. But I noticed a lot of people out there are like really confused about who was going to be added, and Min Min makes sense considering Min Min was top of the. I believe there's a popularity chart, and then I've heard people say there wasn't one, but apparently she was top of it, and also she was like one of the single most played characters in any like game format, and then also as the direct itself said, the main it was either producer or director wanted her in. I mean, there you go. Everyone likes Min Min, and I'm actually really glad she got included over Twintel or Spring Man, because Spring Man's super basic, and I think from a gameplay standpoint, they did a good job of kind of reaching what ARMS is like, considering ARMS is all about alternating and utilizing your two different arms and what weapons are attached to them. I've always thought it was interesting because it's a fighting game where you essentially have like a loadout, and you utilize that loadout to your advantage, and I find that very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And they carried it all over into Min Min. Her dragon head, her like hard hitting ball thing, I don't know what to call it, and then her like little like boomerang ring thingy. All of those were part of her kit, and like some other characters' kits too, but not all fighters had the same equipment. I mean, overall, it's actually surprisingly, I was more happy with the announcement than I expected to be.
Well, it's with ARMS. I haven't played ARMS, but it is one of Nintendo's more recent, like original IPs.
Yeah.
Next to Splatoon.
Hmm.
Other than that, Nintendo, they don't really make a whole lot of new IPs. They kind of ride off of, they have their Marios, their Pokemons, their Zeldas, and they kind of just make new games with those franchises, Donkey Kong, etc. So it's rare that we see something new from them. And I hear ARMS is actually a pretty solid game.
Yeah.
I've never gotten around to playing it because it's not really my type of game.
It's also always at like full price still, which I'm kind of like, Nintendo, come on.
Well, that's Nintendo. I mean, it's impossible to get their games for less than $45, and like for instance, Zelda has been out for 3 years now. I think the cheapest I've ever seen is $45 on Nintendo's eShop, and those sales are so few and far between.
Yeah.
It's so hard to catch them. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's just how Nintendo does. I mean, they sell like Animal Crossing. They sell freaking like they just never feel the need to make them cheaper, I guess. Which if they can sell them, that
Yeah, if they can sell them, they sell them. I mean, they also, I mean, you know how it is. The live stream, they also pushed the new amiibos since there were new amiibos coming for new fighters. So it's all about product, man. Roll that product out.
product. Gotta get some product.
Oh, there was one thing I want. The team that makes Arms is also making Ninjala. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Ninjala character in some like future update if they continue to work on Smash far into the future. So
For sure.
I mean, hey, Ninjala looked fun, all things considered. So, I don't know, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Also, but before we pass over, the only thing I want to say is that Joker amiibo is real clean, and I was kind of shocked by how good it looks.
Yeah, a lot of people that I mean, obviously I'm not really a Persona guy, but a lot of people were talk that in like groups I'm in were like, dude, that's like the best looking amiibo they've made. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
there you go.
it comes off as the best one they made. So, but yeah,
Yeah. So speaking of Smash, there's another word that rhymes with it called Crash. And speaking of Crash, you have Crash 4. It's About Time was just officially unveiled at the beginning of this week. I thought so. I'm gonna give my like once again. Last week I mentioned I haven't played Smash. I do want to get around to playing the or Crash. I do want to get around to playing the remakes. Based on what I've seen of the remakes, this new one looks like it's keeping true to the spirit of those games, which I think is a good idea. Trying to follow the classic kind of feel while innovating in different ways by having like there's like a time control mechanic, like you stop time and
yeah.
some other things. I thought it visually looked pleasant, like it looked nice and enjoyable. And yeah, I actually I'm excited for it. There's a little bit more news announced later in the week that apparently it has over 100 levels or something. Like it's 3 times bigger than any Smash game or whatever before it, or Crash game.
Basil, you shouldn't have said that in the beginning.
I know I made that rhyme and now I can't get it out of my head. So apparently it's a pretty huge game. That's why it's $40 or $60 apparently because they want to justify that price. So they made it like a giant game. So I mean, we'll see whether or not the quality can be maintained for that many levels.
Yeah.
But your thoughts?
Well, for one, I didn't hear about that, so that's interesting. Just going off what I saw, I was like, this is like old school Crash, or at least closer to the old school kind of vein. It didn't go in like a 3D platform, or I'm sorry, a like 3D collectathon kind of route, which I heard some people were thinking it might go in that kind of direction, which I was interested because like I was like, yeah, maybe this will be like a new modern Crash game that's going to go in a completely like new direction and make it something like, because it's such a big thing right now to do open world collectathon platformers.
Yeah.
After the last Mario, you got Hat in Time, you got, a lot of platformers that are in that vein. But no, they stuck to their guns and they are doing it in the same style, which I was like, oh, okay, I'm pleasantly surprised by that. I like the way Crash handles platforming. I've always thought his kind of way about it has always been really fun. I've always really liked the kind of like you're along a track and you have to do your best to platform in that said track, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's always super fun, and I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. The new mechanics are cool. Also, from what I've heard, this is also going to retcon some things. Like it's just forgetting about the games that came after 3 from like a continuity standpoint. I don't know why that matters, but it's probably going to mean some fun things.
It makes a lot of sense to stick with just make a sequel to the trilogy, especially because they had the remakes. Like that's what people are going to kind of remember.
Yeah.
At this point,
I saw some really good stuff in the trailers and stuff. Like I really like the new boss battle with I forget the character's name. Is it Insane? It's the doctor who has like a rocket sticking out of their head. Got like this cool like rhythm game kind of boss fight where you're gonna have to like dodge things based on what like the music playing or something like that. There's some Cortex gameplay, which I was like, oh, we're going down that route again. Which there was a Crash game before this that was like that, where you played as Cortex and you did stuff. So that's super interesting. Other than that, I don't have a lot to say. I'm excited.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm definitely going to try out the Insane trilogy before to see, gotta give Crash a fair shake, and then if those games kind of grab me or entertain me enough, I'll definitely look into getting this later in the year. I think it's kind of cool to see a like beloved franchise get a modern sequel, but still remaining true to the original. I love it when, you have, let's say, a trilogy of games that are like beloved, and then it kind of goes through a dark time, and then a new one comes out, and it's kind of bringing back to that original feel. And speaking of that kind of, ideology,
Oh man.
Halo Infinite just had a tease, and did you like that segue?
Yeah, that was like really like sad at the same time. I was like, oh, Basil.
But so Halo Infinite had a little tease on Twitter, revealing that the Banished, a brute faction that was introduced in Halo Wars 2, will in fact be a antagonist in the game. So this is like pretty big on a lot of fronts. Well, one, the tweet, like the video on the tweet was viewed like 2.7 million times or whatever in like a day and a half, which is pretty impressive considering the tweet doesn't even mention Halo Infinite or anything. It's just like a little audio file. So I thought that was kind of cool to see that people still care. The coolest thing about this is one of the biggest issues at the end of Halo 5 was the enemy faction that was going to be the main enemy was Cortana and the robots, and that storyline people don't really care about at all. So it looks like with Halo Infinite, the storyline of Halo Wars 2 is much better than the story in Halo 5. And the enemies in Halo Wars 2 are much more interesting than the enemies in honestly like any Halo game since like Halo 3, in my opinion. And the fact that they're bringing the Banished into Halo Infinite is really I mean, it makes a ton of sense. It's a great idea, and it also allows for a lot new, interesting like gameplay elements because like the brutes and the Banished are much different than the brutes in like Halo 3. They're not just a bunch of crazy fanaticals. They're like they're intelligent and they're mercenaries and they want to just like kind of build this from your bootstraps empire, not like they're not trying to follow some kind of crazy ideology or anything. They just want to be the power because they've been like pushed down for so long.
Okay.
Like the origin of them is their leader Atriox was kind of like witnessing all of the brutes and the jackals and the grunts and the elites that would be sent out to die for the Covenant, and he like took umbrage with that. He was like, "This is not good." So he rebelled against the Covenant, and then this was near like the end of the Covenant, and he like escaped with a bunch of like loyal followers of his, and then they just built up, and then after the Covenant was destroyed, they grew in numbers substantially because one, a lot of the Covenant was just looking for any kind of stability, and he was offered them a different type of living, where everybody was like equals. And the lore behind it is really cool, I think, but also they're just from an aesthetic point of view, the Banished are awesome. They take classic Covenant like vehicles and stuff, and they add like plates of armor and spikes and stuff to them. They just look really really cool, and just the thought of seeing that in first person sounds super awesome. And honestly, they're a pretty easy enemy faction to introduce to a game. I think like all they have to do in the beginning of the game is have like a quick explanation of who they are, because they're not really that complicated. They're just like out for themselves, and they just want more power and more like technology and stuff to stabilize their, because they kind of have been stuck on like the edges of the galaxy. But I think they could, if they do handle it well, I think they can introduce them in a good way. I'm excited just because it means that the created Cortana robot Hitler whatever storyline is not as big of a deal anymore, which is great. Hopefully they kind of almost like they can't drop that entirely, unfortunately, even though I'd be okay with that. Hopefully they make it as small as, which I think is what they're going to do. They're going to make that storyline as small as possible and try to expand in different areas.
I mean, with the inclusion of the Banished, this also means that we can officially mention that we know for a fact the Flood are they exist still. They're out there. So since
Yeah,
going off Halo Wars 2, the Banished actually straight up had a like skirmish with them. So I wonder if that'll play into Halo Infinite at all, and maybe that could tie into Cortana's whole plot line.
Well,
Hear
yeah.
me out here. I'm gonna go like big brain mode. What if they're going to explain? They're gonna be like, all right. Turns out Cortana is since she's still dealing with all the stuff that was happening with the Gravemind way back in Halo 2 and 3. Maybe this is all a big connective tissue back to the return of this like other group of Flood that's still sitting out there that the Banished encountered. Maybe it has some small tie to that, and that's actually what she's doing with these robots is she's going to go and eradicate this like last thing, and then that leads to the Banished, and then that leads to Chief getting into this whole situation with the Banished. Maybe it'll bring in some of the characters from, was it the Pillar of Fire or whatever?
Pillar, or no, the
Or
Spirit of
Spirit
Fire.
of Fire. I always mess that one up. I never remember its name. The Spirit of Fire. Maybe we'll see some people from that show up as a result. Because remember, those guys were like the two groups were still fighting even at the end of Halo 2, weren't
Yeah,
or Halo Wars
Halo
2.
Wars 2.
Yeah. Not Halo 2. What? Yeah, so they're still fighting, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see those guys too. Honestly, I could see them making that work and it'd be a simple but effective Halo plot, you know?
Yeah, which is what Halo needs, a simple but effective plot. That's what it doesn't need to be like this convoluted, Master Chief has to fight Locke but not really, but like all that crazy stuff that you don't need
I
that.
mean, you say that, but that was like a compelling, interesting plot till they totally didn't do it well, and didn't do it at all, really.
You made a good point though about like this is a perfect opportunity to bring back the Flood. And I know it would be like retconning sort of like there's no way when they wrote Halo 5 that they were like, oh, Cortana is secretly
Yeah,
she's secretly still kind of damaged from the Flood. The fact that if you just think about it, that kind of makes sense. I think like if I'm a writer on Halo Infinite, I'm like, okay, what can we use from the past and make it look like it was the plan all along? That. You do that, and then it's like, oh, you see, they set it up in Halo 2. Like, that was insane, man. And it's like, that would be perfect.
I could just imagine Chief just getting out and seeing the flames like, again?
But if the Flood is in the game, they cannot reveal it at all
Yeah,
before the game
that
comes
is
out.
entirely true. I think they need to keep it a complete secret.
Could you imagine, like, you play through, and it's like a 20-hour game, and you play through the first 10 hours, and it's against, like, the Created and the Banished, and then the Flood shows up? Like, that would be insane.
Oh,
It would blow my mind.
wait. All right. I got a picture for you. So imagine, you're at that 10-hour mark, and then you're assailed by the first Flood you've seen in like years. But then, to make this a super cool triumphant move that could potentially redeem not only Cortana's big stupid arc, but also this is gonna sound great. You're gonna love this. Chief is dealing with whatever he's up against. He's fighting a large force of Flood out of nowhere that he, totally not ready for. Thought they were gone. Didn't expect them. And as things are looking bleak, suddenly the crew of the Spirit of Fire shows up. And he gets like a little bleep from Cortana being like, hey, I brought you some backup.
See, or it's like the dude, the captain of the Spirit of Fire is like on your left.
I'd be happy with either of those. That would be cool. It would just be the right level of like
I
nice.
see. There's a sentiment that like, oh, the Spirit of Fire deserves to have their story finished in like a Halo Wars 3, and unfortunately, I don't think Halo Wars 2 did good enough to warrant that. I just don't think there's enough demand for another RTS Halo game, unfortunately. But I think bringing those characters into Halo Infinite and bring them into the mainline games honestly would be perfect because one, it gives them a fitting ending to those characters. Like, okay, these characters we're not just going to throw in a comic book or a novel to end them. We're going to bring them into the main flagship title in the series. The other thing is they could do it in DLC, like story DLC
Yeah.
or something. Like you could have a story of like maybe the main campaign doesn't have the Spirit of Fire, but they're kind of like alluded to by the Banished. And then there's like a DLC where you play on the Ark with the Spirit of Fire playing as like Jerome or one of those other Spartans.
Yeah.
There's so many cool things you could do right now based on the setup that Halo Wars 2 did. I mean, the more I think about it, Halo Wars 2 is really like the saving grace. Like it's an RTS, but story narrative wise, it saved a lot of the issues that Halo 5 had, and is helping to set Infinite up to fix those problems. But this tease, it just tells us that the brutes are going to be in it, and we'll see more either next week or the week after, I'm guessing, when they finally reveal this effing game that I've been waiting half a decade for.
I mean, all I gotta say is I'm excited because I've heard nothing but good about the
Yeah,
Banished.
you should play
I need
Halo Wars 2 if you ever
it's
get
sitting
the
over
chance.
there in a box. Like I have it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I bought it.
It's good.
When I got my Xbox One, I bought like the Master Chief Collection. I bought Halo Wars 2. I bought Sunset Overdrive. And I bought like 5 games. Some of them were cheaper by that point. Some of them were more expensive. But I bought like 5 games from the the Rare Replay collection. And
Nice.
I've been meaning to play Halo Wars 2 because I liked Halo Wars 1 and I like the Spirit of Fire. I forget the name of the ship all the time, but the crew was cool. I really like.
Yeah,
they're just awesome.
Those
too.
characters are great.
Yeah.
And like, if you end up being like interested in a big way, like in Halo Infinite, like if the reveal does catch your fancy, then I would definitely recommend playing Halo Wars 2 because then it'll kind of catch you up to speed. I'm sure in the game of Halo Infinite they're going to explain like what happened to, or at least they'll explain where the Banished came from. But Halo Wars 2 does it in a very satisfying way, and I don't think Atriox, which is the leader of the Banished, I don't think he's going to be in Halo Infinite, because the problem right now with the Banished, with not all the Banished, but with the Spirit of Fire and the Atriox, the people on the ring, or sorry, they're on the Ark. And the problem is the Ark has been cut off from the rest of the galaxy, so they're kind of like isolated, and the Banished lost their big ship with their hyperdrive or whatever, and the Spirit of Fire is damaged. So they're both kind of stuck on the Ark.
Oh, okay.
Now, that sets up like maybe the story of Halo Infinite starts out on the ring and then makes its way to the Ark, which, it's a little similar to Halo 3, but I would be okay with that. Like, I'm honestly at the point with Halo where if the story is a carbon copy of like Halo 1 or whatever, I'd kind of be okay with it. Like if it's The Force Awakens but for Halo, I'm fine with that. Like we've had so much just mediocre or weird Halo games that like a back to basics game, exactly what we need.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm glad that you explained the whole Arc thing because again, I was throwing things out because I didn't know that they were isolated like that. But there's a lot of compelling things there that like I don't know. I
but by no means is that like a permanent situation. Like there's always, I mean, the Ark is full of Forerunner technology, so you could be like, oh well, they found this Forerunner slip space dealio.
I mean, literally, they're using the Forerunners to retcon, or they used the Forerunners to do all that stupid stuff with Cortana. Why can't they do it to do something likable and actually have the Spirit of Fire and the Banished figure their way out?
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, yeah,
I'm excited.
Yeah, all right.
Cautiously optimistic as per the norm, but excited.
It really says something when you can tell Basil's favorite thing in this whole announcement or this whole like show was the Halo tease because we talked about it for like 12 minutes.
Yeah. I made this show just to talk about Halo teases, okay?
Why don't you just admit it? This is actually Halo Drive. It's finally happening. Speaking
of beloved franchises and characters, there was a recent Avengers show where they showed off the new Avengers game. What do you think about Destiny Avengers?
Yes. Yes, I also like Destiny 2, the new Avengers. Oh boy. So all right. I know you just joked about it and I just made a joke about it, but yes, the Avengers game got some footage. It looks like Destiny. I am okay with that. I don't want to sound like I'm disingenuous towards Destiny. Like, I actually don't think Destiny's like gameplay itself is why the game has such a bizarre like standing with people. It's more because of how they've handled it. The gameplay itself, I think, has always been okay, and sometimes at its higher peak during like good raids and stuff. When I played it. Mind you, only Destiny 1. I don't know where Destiny 2 is at. I don't really even care. Besides what you've mentioned on the podcast before. But I like the gameplay. I like the overall feel of it. But now, if you're handing me you're giving me a universe I understand and know already. You're giving me characters I know already. You're giving me powers, concepts, and ideas that I know already. Let me tell you something. You just made a winning combination. You just made me a nice mixed drink that I'm going to drink very pleasantly. And that's what I feel like I'm getting right now from what I saw with the Avengers title. I really, really, really like what's going on with it. I
Oh, really?
Yeah, right? The more I said on, all right, so at first I was like, kind of like, but the more I said on it, and I talked with a few friends, I was like, actually, I'm excited. I'm like, I think I've gone full circle. I think I went from being like, it's just Destiny to, oh man, it's Destiny. So the reason for that, by the way, is because I actually like the idea of having, for one, they've said that they're mixing story and co-op together. Like they're going to be like tangentially connected through most of the experience, which I think is really cool because, you know, I don't know about you, Basil, but like I have a lot of friends that like, they like Marvel. A lot of people like these characters,
Yeah.
and because of how much of a like social zeitgeist now, like Marvel comics have become, and the heroes of the Marvel universe, I'm super excited to kind of have that experience with other people where I get to play a game focused around these characters. Again, similar to like the last time I had like a co-op experience that was Marvel related was back when Marvel Ultimate Alliance was a thing. And that was couch co-op only, unfortunately. But that game was super cool, had a lot of cool story stuff, and there were a lot of characters, so you had like a lot of fun time switching between different characters making your team. And like this is an opportunity for you to like really flesh out how a character plays, that's at least in the Avengers or in that potential group of heroes. And I like that. And there's also the fact that there's little things that they've done that have shown me that I feel like the team knows what they're doing. Like when they showcase that there are multiple trees to how you can play your character. You can play a flight focused version of like Thor, or a ground based version, or a ranged based if you want to like use his hammer and his lightning. And I was like, that's cool. I kind of like the idea that you can kind of focus on what side of the character you want to utilize most. Obviously, that won't mean anything in the long run because ultimately, the way games work is everyone will find out what the best in slot is, and they will just go that.
Yeah.
That's the one thing as someone who has been around like a lot of games where it's all about min maxing, and I'm sure you've seen it too. It's like you get what's most optimal and you use it, and I'm like, yeah, it takes away from the fun though. But
Yeah, it really. Yeah.
yeah, I like the costumes. I think it's a no brainer. And they also showcase that gear will actually have not only a physical effect on you, but also your attacks, which I was like, that's crazy. So you mean like my laser beams are gonna be different color? That alone, like little details like that, are so rare in games like this. So I was like
Yeah,
pretty pumped up about that.
for sure.
They announced the villain. I was really excited because MODOK is such an under talked about antagonist. He's usually like comic relief, and now he's going to actually have like a new role in the kind of like new Marvel zeitgeist that isn't the comic books itself. That's exciting for me too.
Not as jazzed for this as you are, but I did think it looked a lot better than the previous showings they made of it. My biggest issue still kind of remains with the base gameplay. There's some of the, like the moves and stuff they do, like the special moves, looked really really cool, but the kind of base like traversal and combat looked a little bit janky to me. Like maybe it just needs more polish, but it looked kind of just stiff, and it made me think of Godfall. Weird,
Uh
like
oh.
it had that kind of just stiff, like, oh, they would go to a swing and there'd be like this pause mid swing, and I'm like, why is that there? But maybe it just doesn't show very well. Like it might play better. I did like a lot of the customization options they showed. I thought those looked really cool. They didn't look like super minor cosmetic changes. They look like a lot of like visual, like Iron Man would be a completely different suit. Thor would have a completely different like getup. Like these aren't just
Yeah.
tiny little changes. These are full costume changes, which is cool. Like I think that's something Spider-Man did really well, and I think it looks like they're doing here. There's another kind of concern, and I get that you can only like balance it for so many characters, but the lineup of Avengers that they chose to go with, I don't know if it's the best. Like I still don't know. I mean, I get it, Black Widow, blah blah blah, but it's like why would you ever play? How do you make her go into a fight and have the same kind of effect as like Thor and make it kind of believable without like being like, okay, so she there's this certain disconnect, and I think the movies do it decently well. Of like she focuses on other areas, but if this is more of a beat 'em up, I don't know how that's gonna play. Like, I mean,
Well, I was gonna say, I was talking with again, good friend of mine that we were talking about it, and when I brought up Black Widow. I actually brought up because you made a comment. You're like, who's gonna actually want to play her though? Because what's she going to bring to the table? And he actually he was like, well, maybe we do need like a more dedicated support style character. And I was like, okay, actually, I didn't consider that because Hawkeye, and Black Widow, and even Cap really, they may be like they might not be the heaviest hitters of the group, but they definitely have their strengths. Like Widow also has like you gotta consider that she might have like status effects and stuff. So like for actual
yeah,
bosses, like things like shock and potentially like I believe like poisons and stuff like there's potential there to make something that's an interesting playstyle. Like maybe she could be like a big like damage over time focused character, or like
yeah,
So I think like we have to think outside the box here and consider that we have to apply things like Thor very much seems like he's a very weird versatile character, whereas Iron Man comes off as more of a like a completely range focused, and then you've got someone who's almost completely melee and Hulk. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
everyone's gonna have their role, I think, and I think Widow's going to fall into that more kind of interesting, unique support playstyle, I guess. And
yeah,
then Kamal's a bruiser. By the way, Miss Marvel's inclusion is really cool.
yeah. And they did a pretty good job, I think, of her making her like animation work. Because like Miss Marvel's never been in live action, and this isn't live action, but it's supposed to be realistic. And she has a very kind of goofy power set. Like she like stretches and makes her hands big. And like in comic panels, that like it looks just fine. It looks really cool. But when you translate that, you have the risk of making it look very, very cheesy, like a la Fantastic Four with like the movies in like 2005 or whatever, where
Yeah.
he's like stretching and it just looks really weird. But I think they did a pretty solid job of making it work.
I mean, honestly, from the gameplay I saw, I actually liked hers a lot. So I kind of like the goofiness of like having a power, like increasing the size of your limbs and stuff.
Yeah,
I enjoy it, all things considered. I think the bigger thing, the thing that won me over, by the way, now all this is great, but the thing I was actually worried about is what's the actual game plan here. Because for one, we don't have there's not a lot of heroes still. Like you mentioned, you kind of did say that we don't have like this incredible roster yet. Yes, we have the big boys of the now big boys. It's such an interesting thing that we have to preface that because,
yeah,
the Avengers used to not be as like incredibly popular as they are now. They were like considered
yeah,
almost B tier, which is the weirdest thing to consider. But
yeah.
you got Iron Man, you got Thor, you got Hulk, you got Black Widow, and then you got Kamala, and then maybe Captain America. Whatever's going on with that, I'm telling you.
My theory is that they're gonna make you think he's dead, and then in the game he's gonna be a villain. He's gonna come back as a villain who's being mind controlled or something. Then at the end of the game, he's gonna be good again. That's my theory.
Yeah, I could see that. It's very comic book.
What was the other thing? Oh, the other thing that I found kind of funny is isn't Square Enix making this game?
Yes, Crystal Dynamics.
So Square Enix is publishing it though, and they're also publishing Outriders, and they kind of have a similar audience slash feel. Like they're both
Yeah,
Destiny-ish, like open world co-op games with like gear
but they're
and
trying to
loot
go
and
like a different kind of like you got the Marvel game that's more of a like it's more of a superhero-y, you got the colorful costumes, you got the unique,
these two games. They're like, how close are they releasing to each other?
well,
Because
do we
I feel
have
like you're kind of biting into your own audience.
when's Outriders even coming out?
That's a good question.
It says late 2020 is the only thing we have for Outriders. So,
December 2020 is something.
and then the Avengers game comes out in September, August, right?
September.
Yeah. So I don't think they're releasing. Maybe Square just wants to control the market.
I guess so, but it's just weird to have two of these types of games coming out so soon next to each other. Especially when like it's hard to get into that market. I mean, remember Destiny's going to have a huge fall expansion.
Yeah. I think this is one of those cases where, like, I guess
And then there's the Godfall game coming out in the fall, which is like another one of those gear loot
who
games.
cares?
I'm just saying, like, it's a very saturated market.
Notorious opinion of the show or of the podcast. We don't like Godfall.
But yeah, pretty much.
I
So I
mean,
don't know. I I'll probably give Avengers a fair chance. I do enjoy to an extent those loot-based games. I it's hard for me to care about more than one at a time. And I honestly like Outriders to me looks more appealing than the Avengers game. And it's like I don't know if I want to get both of those games, or like I'd probably give Avengers a try and be like, "Oh, that's all right." But also the fall's already jam-packed with games. Like you have Halo and Cyberpunk and
I think the bigger thing though, the bigger like thing for me here is that I think the thing that's won me over and why I am going to play Avengers is, again, there's that recognizability. Like, I know these characters, you know.
oh, well, yeah,
It,
it's
it
going to sell
yeah,
well,
yeah.
I imagine.
But the thing there's something we didn't talk about though that I was going to get into a little bit was their actual post launch plan and how they're talking about it a little bit.
Yeah.
The fact that there's no DLC, the fact that they say everything is free, is I'm like kind of like, are you sure?
Yeah.
It's just a little hard for me as someone who has seen this before. You know, we've heard it. Oh, it's all free, guys. Don't worry. And then along the lines, it's not. It's not at all. Destiny is a great example of, like, we thought it was going to be like, you know, they were talking about how it was going to have this long plan and all that. Well, here we are. You had to pay for Destiny's like 7 bad expansions except for the one good one, and then Destiny 2 happened, and they're like, haha, we're gonna monetize it. And then they're also
Yeah.
like, guess what? We're still monetizing our expansions. And you're like, what? Like
Yeah.
it and considering how confusing it was and how Destiny was supposed to also be, like, they said that Destiny 1 was going to be like a 20-year like thing, and or whatever it was, 14 or something, and it didn't happen. So I'm a little wary on this thing that they say it's going to be completely free, but if it is, we're gonna start seeing that in the coming months, because they did say they're doing a new hero announcement. They're going to talk about their first post-launch hero, which I'm like, good. You should be talking about your new characters.
Who do you think it's going to be?
All right, I'm gonna throw this out there. It could be Spider-Man, depending on how that goes. Maybe Sony is like, yeah, Crystal Dynamics, and well, then again, it depends on if the Spider-Man character is easy to like openly throw around in games right now.
Yeah, I mean, isn't he's in Ultimate Alliance 3, right?
Yeah,
So I think they'd be fine to use him.
yeah. All right, then it could be Spider-Man. It could be Ant-Man.
I was thinking about Ant-Man. How do you do Ant-Man in a video game? Like, you play as him when he's tiny? How does that work?
Well, I don't know. They'd have to really think outside the box, but it could be fun. Well, don't forget he also has his Giant Man thing where he can get
Yeah.
huge.
I mean, I think I'm like pretty sure I would bet that it's going to be Doctor Strange.
It could. Well, hold on. We also have Hawkeye still too.
Oh, yeah. And Crystal Dynamics likes doing bow mechanics. Have you played
Yeah.
Tomb Raider?
Yeah, I know they love their bows. Yeah, it could be Hawkeye. It could be Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange would be really fun, actually. I'd like to see us have a magic character. That would be super cool. Spider-Man, and then if I had actually Black Panther.
Oh, yeah, that's another good. I didn't think about that.
That's the thing. You gotta also look at like who they view as like what the community would want. I mean,
Also, Captain Marvel, possibly.
Captain Marvel. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be happy about it.
Or any, like, there's so many big characters because of, like, the movies, they could pull anyone.
Then again, we also have to comment on the fact that they decided to
Scarlet
pull...
Witch.
Ooh. Anyone from X... I wonder if they're allowed to use the X-Men yet.
I don't know that they are.
Damn it!
Or they... No, they should be able to.
I want them to. Yeah, no, because remember
Wolverine,
the X-Men got
that'd be
in...
awesome.
They got... The X-Men are coming to Ultimate Alliance
Ultimate
now.
Alliance.
So maybe they could.
Yeah.
I'd love to see some X-Men. Wolverine, Cyclops. That's
Magneto
like
could be cool.
that's like far off. I don't believe it. Then again, the only reason, here's the thing, I think that we're up in the air about what we could see because remember they did also put Miss Marvel in, and she's like a
Yeah,
main
yeah,
character. So
yeah. So could be anyone.
I get
Could be anyone.
I guess we'll just hold our breath and see because there's too many options at the moment. I think to
Yeah.
single it
I
down.
hope that it ends up being a fun game. We'll see. Or we won't. Maybe we won't see ever.
We'll find out at release day. It's actually absolutely terrible, and there's no reason to play it.
In fact, it's not even a video game. You just put it in, and then it's just like
It's just
Avengers Endgame.
no,
That's
it's
all it
no,
is.
it's Age of Ultron.
Oh no. Oh man. All right. Well, I think that's enough about the Avengers event. Moving on to the next event. Cyberpunk had an event. Cyberpunk 2077, just so you don't confuse it with any other Cyberpunks, had a event called Night City Wire where they showed off. They talked a little bit more about the game. They announced like an anime for the game.
I can talk about that real quick if you want me to, just to like elaborate.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just. It's called Cyberpunk Edge Runners, but you talk about it because I have no idea what the studio or anything.
First off, one weirdest announcement. I don't think anyone was ready for it. This is, by the way, this is also the apparently the age of games getting anime adaptations because they announced one like for another game like right after
Yeah.
that. But so yeah, Cyberpunk, whatever it was called, I wasn't paying attention to the name of the anime, but is made by
Edge Runners.
Edge Runners. Okay, is made by Studio Trigger. Now, Studio Trigger is very well known now. They're huge. They got a lot of popularity when they put out an OVA called Little Witch Academia, which was beautiful. Its story was simple and effective, and it was funny. It was entertaining. It was a good time. Then they became even more. I forget if it was the OVA first or if it was the first real series they made, but the first series that everyone always thinks of is called Gurren Lagann. It was a mech show, and it has a lot of really memey lines, and it's got just a lot of interesting things that a lot of people make reference to. And from there on, they just kept going. They made like Kill la Kill. They made a full Little Witch Academia show. They made the Promare movie, which I went to go see on my birthday, and that movie was incredible. Let me just say, these guys are, when it comes to pure animation, it's crazy what they can do. The only thing I'm confused by is I don't know how well that will translate over to Cyberpunk. Some friends I had said they're like, this'll work perfectly, guys. And I'm like, will it though? Because Studio Trigger kind of has a more, like, they're a more humor-focused team. Like, there's a lot of, like, funny humor and, like, weird, irreverent, like, bizarre storytelling. And I'm just like, will that work with that? With staying in this vision? I can't talk, holy cow. This vision for the future.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I don't really have much to say about the anime. I kind of want to move a little bit into the game itself,
Yes.
but they revealed brain dancing, which is essentially the detective mode for Cyberpunk. It's very similar to like the Batman Arkham games detective mode, where you like watch over the scene and you zoom in on items of interest. It's a very interesting thing to reveal during this show. I mean, it's more about stories, so like they can have all sorts of different stories about different people instead of having to just focus on your main character, which is, I mean, it'll obviously a lot of that depends on the writing, and I think CD Projekt Red has showed they have the chops to fill in those stories and make them interesting.
Yeah.
But I do think that the showcase they had was kind of a little boring, but they also let a lot of the press and YouTubers and stuff play the game for about 4 hours, and a lot of the impressions and stuff were just like overtly positive. Apparently, like the what was it? As far as I could tell from the positive side, the driving's not as bad as people were afraid it was going to be. The shooting apparently has gotten a lot better since the last time they showed it. Apparently, on the negative side, or what I've heard, is that it's a little overwhelming. Like the city, there's so much going on. To me, that's kind of like a double-edged sword because that's negative in the sense that there's too much going on, but positive in the sense that there's so much to do.
When I heard about the overwhelming thing, and I didn't hear about the other details because I wasn't listening to what the press was saying. I did watch the Night City Wire, but I heard the overwhelming thing, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, this is one of those cases where it totally depends on who you are and how well you can handle like the overload of having infinite like options, like directions to go.
Yeah, for sure.
As someone who gets sidetracked a lot by like side content, I have a notorious story where, so as someone who, yes, I played Elder Scrolls, I played Skyrim the first time I played it. I did not finish the story. In fact, I didn't even get a quarter into the main story till I was like 70 hours in, because I didn't even really think about where I was supposed to go for the story because I got sidetracked by all this other stuff and I wanted to explore caves and get loot. And by that point, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna check out the story and see how it is. The story took me 2 hours. Like I blew through it. I was like, oh, so I think an overwhelming amount of content is going to be interesting. The thing about that though, CD Projekt Red has very compelling main stories, so I
Oh
don't
yeah.
think I'm going to have to worry about that. Notably, that overwhelming aspect happened to me in Witcher 2, where I got sidetracked super hard, or in Witcher 3, I'm sorry. I got
Yeah.
sidetracked super hard in Witcher 3. I still haven't finished the main plot, which I feel really bad about, but I did so much side stuff because I was having so much fun exploring and fighting. So
Yeah.
I personally, it's just a thumbs up. Honestly, even if I don't finish the main story, at least I'm getting something. I'm getting like a ton of fun out
Yeah.
of it. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think, I mean, from what I saw, and there was also a bit of gameplay that one of a couple of websites revealed, like that showed there's like three different opening characters, or not opening characters. You can start with three different backstories. So you can be a street kid, a nomad, or a corpo. And the corpo is like somebody who's rising through the ranks of like the corporate world. Nomad is like you don't even live in the city, you're just this like wanderer. And street kid is like you grew up in the streets of the city and like kind of had to like, fight to get anything.
Yeah.
So, in with each of these different starting points, so depending on what character you pick or what backstory, you start at a different part of the world. So the corpo starts in like the skyscrapers in the middle of the city, like up in the corporate world. The street kid starts in the slums, and the nomad actually starts outside of the city in this like desert called the Badlands, which looks really good by the way. It's really cool because it's like the replayability there is actually pretty strong. Like depending on what character and class you pick, your start is completely different. Which I'm trying to think of other games that have done this. You look at something like Skyrim, and you can pick a completely different race, gender, character, blah blah blah, but you always start in the same spot. And I just can't think of a lot of RPGs that, depending on what you or what class you pick, you start in a different. Like Mass Effect lets you pick your background, but you always start at the same point.
I
So I
have one
find that.
example.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I actually no. I mean MMOs do this sometimes, but also the first Dragon Age.
Oh, really?
Depending on all right, the first Dragon Age Origins, depending on your race and your actual like background, maybe it was just tied to your race, but basically if you, depending on what you picked, you would have a completely different opening to the game. Like, and when I say completely different, I mean like the first like 2 to 3 hours are completely different from the other routes because you're finding out this whole story. Like, I played the first time as a human, like member of this like, I think I was a part of like a royal. I had like some like kind of attachment to this royal family, or it was like a small house, kind of like think like Game of Thrones. And
Hmm.
you played through this opening as eventually people came in, they attacked your home, and it fell apart. And then there's another one where you played as a mage, and you went through this whole like small like trial examination thing, and it was really cool how different they were. So it's a really if they're doing the same thing, it's a really cool experience, and it's something to consider like starting another character just to see like the differences.
Yeah, which is definitely like if I like that game as much as I liked The Witcher 3, I will definitely be playing it multiple times. And the fact that like I guess I'll be like now I have to play it three times because I have to play it as a nomad, as a corpo, as a street kid, which is cool too because like they have different dialogue options and different like it seems that there's a lot put into choice in this game, which is just it's great to kind of just see everything, and I really appreciate that.
Out of curiosity, which one would you go with first?
I don't know. I was waffling honestly between the Nomad or the Corpo because they have more visually interesting starts. So the Nomad, you're out in the desert outside of the city, and you get to see all that stuff right away. Or with the Corpo, you get to see all the skyscrapers that are like super nice and beautiful right away. But with the because I imagine you're going to spend a lot of the games in the slums, a lot of the game in the slums, regardless of who you pick. So I feel like starting with a character where you get to see different parts of the city right away would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
But like right from the gate, I don't know. Probably would pick the Corpo because I think it'd be cool to see the skyscrapers right away, like at the top of the city. Then you go all the way down into the slums,
Yeah.
and you get to see the contrast. But also, it'd be cool to see the desert outside of the city.
Honestly, I mean, all three are kind of like appealing in different ways. Like, say what you will
Yeah,
about being in the slums, but that kind of life lends your character to a like, they've been in the underbelly of the city, they've grown up in it, they know how garbage it is. So
yeah,
I think it plays itself into a lot of different avenues. So
for sure.
I can see all three, really. I like all three. I'm kind of with you though. The corpo one sounds really, really cool, and I'd like to see how some guy rising up through the corporate ladder, like how he would handle and what his dialogue would be like comparatively.
Yeah,
Considering the other two, I can imagine you have that kind of like gruff, rougher edge that you can like get by through these tough situations. But I'm curious, like, if it's a more diplomatic sounding character, if there's someone who's
hmm.
had to rise up through those kind of situations.
Well, I also wonder if the way other characters react to you, how different that is. So, like, let's say
Yeah.
you're the corpo, maybe like if you're dealing with people in the streets, maybe they're just like a lot less trusting of you because you represent everything they hate. Like the rich upper class.
Yeah.
And then maybe if you're the street kid, maybe people in when you go to deal with like rich people or whatever, they're less trusting of you. Like there's so many things you could play off of that way, which could really just from what the previews have said, this just seems to be one of the best living worlds ever made. I've heard comparisons to like Red Dead 2 and stuff, and I'm like, oh boy, you got a big boy coming in the fall. But it just I'm really really excited for this game, and yeah, these and oh by the way, Night City Wire is going to be I believe a monthly thing, so they'll have more stuff to show as stuff happens and goes on.
Okay.
So
Well, the only comment I did want to leave off with, like, saying for their first Night City Wire, I actually was kind of like really like
yeah,
whatever.
it was a
I
little
I
underwhelming.
was I was pretty whelmed. That's for sure. I was like, the only thing I like the brain dance. I didn't say anything about it, but I will say the brain dance is a really cool mechanic, and I'd love to see what they do with it. The thing I immediately was like really irked by when they showed it off though was the fact that they showed literally nothing. I was like, why are you just listening to the tutorial? I want to see you look around, do
Yeah,
stuff in it.
I would also like to point out that the I thought that the NPCs and the designs of them, like the ones they talked to at least, looked super good.
Oh yeah,
Like and their animations and like the seamless transition between like walking to somebody and talking to somebody. Gone are the days of of like Fallout where you go up to somebody, you press a button, and then it cuts to a close up of them with the dialogue in front of them.
yeah. I agree. I definitely think it looks good. The animations are good. I mean, CD Projekt Red knows animations, and the game is very pretty. In fact, like, I love how the YouTube stream I watched could not keep up with the quality. It just was not possible.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, exciting stuff. Last little news story. We're not going to dwell too much on it, but I just wanted to bring it up because I felt that it was just a good kind of reminder of how games work in sales. Last of Us 2 is the fastest selling PS4 exclusive ever. It has sold 4 million copies in its first week, and this shows a couple of things. One, we are still under like a quarantine. There's still more people at home, so that's obviously going to contribute. There are a lot more PS4s out there than there were during when Uncharted 4, the last best-selling PS4 exclusive, came out. That being said, I think this goes to show that this game was always going to be a success regardless of if you like it or dislike it. And I'm not saying if somebody dislikes it, they're bad, but yeah, there it is. It's it's a smashing success.
Woo! Yay! They did it.
But you have anything to say about that? I just wanted to kind of bring it up.
Not really.
All right.
I
Then we'll move on to what we're playing.
Aw, snap. It's everyone's favorite time of the year. What you playing in this beer?
Dude, I'm using that now. That's gonna be our transition forever.
Yeah, alright. I'm glad you like it. I think it's truly fantastic. I came up with it on the spot. Thank you. Praise me.
I should add like some music behind it, make it a jingle.
Oh boy, that's horrible. Do you want to start or do you want me to?
I'll go first. I'm not playing a whole lot, so it'll be pretty quick. So recently, I oh man, was that this week or last week? What have I been playing? Oh, I played the Sam Story DLC for Metro Exodus. I finished that. It was all right. It was a lot jankier than the main game, but I enjoyed the story. It's pretty enjoyable. Metro Exodus is also like a beautiful game, so it's nice to enjoy that aspect of it. After I finished that, I started playing The Messenger, which is it went on Game Pass. It's a 2D side scroller in the vein of I believe like Ninja Gaiden, like the old ones. It's a whole lot of fun, and I've been really enjoying that. And I'm probably once I finish that, I'm gonna jump onto the Insane Trilogy or SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom.
Oh yeah, that
Those are
came
the
out.
two. I'm waffling between those two games as my next one, but yeah, having a good time with The Messenger. It's like 2D and very old style, and the combat's very fair, and the jumping's a lot of fun. The platforming is, and the boss fights are pretty. Like I'm pretty dumb and bad at video games, but even I'm able to get past these. Not to say they're easy, but the way they telegraph moves and stuff is very well done.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about the Messenger. I did start it on Game Pass at one point, but I didn't get too far. I played more Wizard of Legend off the Game Pass. When it comes to games I played on Game Pass, it was like Wizard of Legend. I did play some of that. I wanted to play some of that Moonlighter, but I didn't get around to it.
Yeah. So what have you been playing, Sky?
Not a lot this week. I same thing. I raid in Final Fantasy 14 like every week, but I did play when my girlfriend came over. We played some Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, and 3 because she
Nice.
felt like going down memory lane because I was kind of like sick that day, and so she played some KH3 and was like, I kind of want to play 1 and 2 now. And I'm like, oh, well, I happen to have the story so far. Lifts up game case. Uh, and she played some of 1, realized that she kind of hates 1, played some 2, and realized she loves 2. So there you
Oh,
go.
there you
And
go.
that was the majority. I sat there and watched, and I picked up the controller and played a little bit too. So other than that, I mean, do mobile phone games count?
Nope, they don't. They're not
Exactly,
real
they don't.
games.
There you go.
All right then. Yeah. So we're not playing a whole lot this week, but stuff's happening. News is newsing. Bruises are bruising, and pretty soon we will see Halo Infinite, which is all I care about anymore because I'm a shell of a man.
I'm ready to play some. You know what? I promise next time on the show I'll bring something interesting. I'll bring like a wacky new game I'm playing.
Yeah, well, I gotta play the Insane Trilogy or something. I don't know. Who knows? What do we even do here? Nobody knows.
The nose
But
knows.
the nose does know. Thanks everybody who tuned in for listening to the weekly game drive. I'm Basil, and
I am by.
he is by. So bye. See you next time.
Bye bye.